Hey guys, what's up? So, what makes a great fantasy series? Fantasy series are basically a new thing. The traditional form of the story is usually the movie, and the movie is where all fantasy's been told, basically. If you go back to the 80s and 90s and whatever, in the early 2000s, the fantasy story was told in the form of movies. Series weren't really necessarily the way they are today. There were some like weekly episodes of stuff happening, but they weren't necessarily a series. They weren't the same kind of series that you get on Netflix. The Netflix of like season 1 and season 2 and season 3, where each episode is like 45 minutes to an hour long. And the previous series were very, very repetitive. It was mainly like the same story over and over again. It wasn't necessarily the same kind of like one story starting in the beginning and going through and continuing on for seasons on end. They weren't sure how many they were going to make. Each episode was standalone and you can watch it by itself. And the story didn't necessarily progress. It just kind of like, it progressed a little bit in some series. It basically, the characters had personalities and the interactions between the characters kind of like were developed, the interrelations between all the different people that were in the story and everything kind of like were developing and stuff like that. But I think the modern series is where it kind of starts and the story starts to get going. And then it just continues and continues and continues. And that's what's cool about that is the story just gets more and more and more involved. And sometimes it will take several episodes, even a whole season, just to get the story going. And once the story's going, it doesn't end because they don't know how many seasons they're going to make of it. So if you look at a series like Stranger Things, there's really no end to that. They're doing season 4, they don't know how many seasons they're going to do. If you look at something like Daredevil or something like that, they were going to do, I think they did 2 already. They were going to do another one, Same with a bunch of other ones. Same with the old series like they used to be in movie form, and it was just like one movie. It started and had a beginning and had an end, and now it's just like they don't really want to end the series. Like, yeah, some series actually go to an end, but a lot of other series they don't really try to end it because they don't really know how many series they're going to do, how many seasons they're going to do, and how many episodes they're going to do, and so they just keep it going and going and going. And I just think like, the span of the series started getting really, really into it with like Supernatural, like a series like that's into like 9 seasons or more or whatever it is. It's just a continuation, and a continuation. And that's what I like about series rather than movies. Because movies are good, but they're very short. And you might think, well, 2 hours to watch a movie isn't that short. But compared to a series, movies are super short. You cannot tell a full story in a movie. They tried to tell the story Dune in the movie Dune, and they couldn't. You couldn't take a book that was just a gigantic, enormous, long novel and tell it in a movie form. Because the movie had to be 2 hours long or 2.5 or something like that. And how do you condense everything to such a small, window of movie? Whereas like a series, it can go on for seasons and seasons and seasons, and that's what's great about it is it lasts. So if there's something you like, it lasts, it continues, and I think that's one of the like major upsides of the series is the fact that it'll just keep going. And the story never has to end. The story can just keep going. Because with movies, it's like, yeah, there's sequels. But if you look at it, it's just like, okay, a movie comes out, the sequel comes out like a year or 2 later. You gotta wait. And if the sequel is also only 2 hours long. It's sort of like when the season 2 comes out of the story, it's maybe 8 episodes, 12 episodes, 20 episodes, whatever it is. Each episode's like 45 minutes to an hour. And it's just so much content. And I really think this is why people like reading series rather than reading a standalone novel. Because a standalone novel has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the story begins and the story ends. But with like the continuing story, the continuing saga of whatever novel never has to end, right? Like the Xanth series with Piers Anthony. That series started in the early 80s and he's still making new Xanth books today. I don't even know how many books he's made. Over 30, over 35, like a lot of books, you know? And that's what's so cool about series is that you get a lot more content, you get more of that story, and I think that's why people like dive into series so much that, you know, you just get into it after a while, you know, whereas a movie, 2 hours, you get into it and it's over, and you're like, wow, it was a great movie, but with a series, it's like, yeah, it's great, and it's going to continue and keep being great, you know, and when it's done well, and when it's done right, it's good because of the length of it, just the content of it, that you can spend hours and hours and hours and days and weeks watching a show that's 10 seasons long or something like that, you know? And that's one of the things that makes a series really, really great, is the fact that there's a lot of content in it and you're able to enjoy it for a long period of time. Another thing that makes series is great, and I think this is also something that makes movies great, with fantasy, it's good when the people that are involved in the movie take it seriously, you know, and not like take it like lightheartedly and like, oh, this is not real, no one's gonna believe this is silly, you know, oh my god, we gotta act these roles out. He's a wizard and he's a mage, and you know, this one's a hobbit and that one is a thief, and like this one is a knight, and oh, this isn't real, like, you know. And when they don't really take it seriously and they don't believe in the story, you get a very, very like the viewer just doesn't get into the story. They don't believe in it either. It's just like the people that are making it don't believe in it. It's sort of like, I think with Conan the Barbarian, the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, is like everyone was in that movie took it super seriously, and they tried to not just make a great fantasy movie, but a great movie, and they were all into fantasy. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course he's into Conan, because he is Conan, you know, he's like this, you know, European bodybuilder guy, you know, that is a barbarian. Like he's probably descended from real barbarians, you know, because he's in that part of the world where there were barbarians, you know, who knows, he probably is a barbarian in some way. And they just took it very, very seriously. There were people like that played the villain. Thulsa Doom was a hella villain. He was someone you hated. He was so bad, you know, like the story was real, and the story had like meaning to it. You know, the reason why things were happening, there's a reason why Conan went after Thulsa Doom, because Thulsa Doom killed his family, killed his people during an old medieval raid on his village. You know, he was enslaved and he was basically forced to fight for the ring, you know, sort of like he became a gladiator when he was trained to fight that way and everything like that. And, you know, he had this vendetta, he had this like real vengeance, and you could tell, you could feel for him, you know, like anyone would have that same vengeance over that same person. And then he falls in love and she dies for him, and it's just like, you know, and they took it really, really seriously, and they really did it. Even like the directors and the writers, they wanted to make a great movie, and they were very, very into the topic. It wasn't silly for them. It wasn't like, oh, this is just silly, why are we doing this, you know? But then if you look at like the sequel that came out, Conan the Destroyer, they didn't really take it that seriously. You know, they did Grace Jones played someone, and she kind of was a good fighter, but beyond that, there was nothing else to her character except that she was like a really tough girl who was like a good fighter, you know. But besides that, there was really nothing about her. They didn't go into her personality or anything like that. Nothing happened. And also like Conan was friends with a thief who was just like, the whole movie, he was just this like little clever thief that was always stealing stuff. Not really any depth to the character or any meaning for, you know, why even put them in the story, you know? It was about like, you know, him with this princess who's like, and she's this little girl, and the whole story was about, he was taken, he was put on a quest to get this horn so they can revive this big statue that turned into a god, that turned into a monster. And it was just like, it felt like so much like they really didn't really want to make a great movie. They just wanted to just have a good time and chill out and not really care about how everything came out. It's just like, it's sort of like that rock band that instead of them trying to make a great concert, they're just like hanging out on stage and being cool and like just doing the song and whatever it is and just trying to have a good time, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with having a good time on stage as a band than a concert, but they're not really focusing on playing the music right. They're not focusing on making a great show or playing the vocals and the instrumentals and doing a great job at it. They're just like not taking it seriously, and it's not going to come out good, right? I think that's the one thing that is the difference, that like when the people that are involved in the movie or the series take it seriously, you believe it. You feel like you get into the story also. And it's just like with fantasy, they either take it seriously and you believe that it's real, and that's the thing about fantasy, is that you have to believe in it, that it's real. Like even like the comics, like in the Marvel comics, you'd have them call the fans of the comics true believers, right? The guy was saying like, oh, welcome back, true believers, It's just because the comics were like fantasy based and they were like superheroes and things like that. And they really wanted their fans to believe that superheroes were real and the things in the stories were real, and they really took it very, very seriously, and people like got into it very, very much. And I think that's the one thing that really makes something great as opposed to making it something average, which is, it's very, very easy to make an average sci-fi movie or like an average fantasy movie or fantasy series by just not taking it seriously and not believing in the reality of the world that it's in and the reality of the characters that are in there, and whether they have powers or there's magic or it's happening in some other planet somewhere. You kind of get into it when people believe that it's real. If you look at something like Star Wars, everyone in the Star Wars, in the movies, they acted very, very, they got into their roles, and it felt real to a lot of viewers. It felt real to the people that were watching it. It didn't feel like people pretending to be somebody, which in some movies, like, it kind of feels that way. It feels like, oh, you could tell that they're not taking the story seriously, and they're not like really, they don't really even understand what the plot's about, and they're just like, telling their lines, trying to be all fancy and showing off and whatever, but not necessarily, getting into the plot, understanding what the story's about, understanding what their character's about, and taking the acting role like seriously and actually being this character, whether it's a mage or a wizard or like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings or something like that. I mean, he took his role seriously. He was Gandalf. He became Gandalf, in the movies, and there's a difference between someone who becomes their character and takes it very, very seriously. With fantasy, the whole thing about fantasy, it takes you to this other world. It takes you to this other imaginary place. It's an escapist thing. It's to get away from it all. It's to not be in the real world for the length of the movie or the length of the series, and to be taken to some other world. And that's why fantasy, it's got fantasy elements like magic and all kinds of like monsters and like demons and dragons and whatever it is, all of these like creatures that you don't see in real life. And also it's in other times, whether it's in the future or the past or another planet or a galaxy far, far away or whatever it is, it's always somewhere else, another dimension, even like, in Victorian ages or even in the whole nother world, like with Shadow and Bone, it's just, they created this whole other world where they put that series, and they invented this whole world and they took it very, very seriously. Like, you felt like the world was real. The people that present it to the public, to the audience, it feels real. And when it feels real to the audience gets into it like it's real. You know, like Game of Thrones and whatever. They took it very, very seriously, and they took it very, like it's real, and that's why it was so good. And I think that's one of the reasons why a fantasy series is so good. For one thing, the content, and for the other thing, it just takes you into this other world for a while where the story just feels real. It feels like you're viewing the story, you know, and you're looking at the story, and it's just convincing, and you have to believe that it's really happening on some level. You know it's not real, you know it's fiction, but it feels like it's real because the characters feel like they're real, and they deliver the lines like it's real, you know? And there's that. I also think like one of the main things also with series is, like in movies and whatever, it's a love story in it, you know? When there's a love story in these things, it makes it blam. It just brings it to the next level. When there's action, takes it to the next level, you know? When there's like constant action and like there's always something going on, takes it to the next level. Lots of fighting, lots of shooting, lots of like magic and like whatever weapons and whatever it is, magic weapons, takes it to the next level. And when there's like a love story, romance story happening in that, also takes it to the next level, and it makes it just that much more interesting, that much more engaging, and that much more believable. So those are just a few things that I think make a fantasy series really, really, really great. Let me know what you guys think about what makes a great fantasy series in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe. Check out my other videos and turn on notifications so you know when I'm making a video. And I will see you guys in another video later.